This is weird. My camera says I'm overexposed on my face and my shirt. Hey everybody, welcome back. I tried to record this video last weekend and the wind was so brutal I came home with footage that I literally couldn't do anything with. Usually maybe there's one or two clips that doesn't work and I can re-record them at home, but it was completely unusable. It doesn't happen often, or at all actually, but yeah, it happened. So I thought I would try to record this at home instead. Most of you know that I use Aperture mode for pretty much all my photography. This video isn't specifically about the mode itself. It's about how Aperture works in relation to your subject and why most of us probably use it in the wrong way. So today I thought I would talk about something I call perspective is king. I'll talk about the principles behind Aperture first, and then later in the video I will go through a few tips and how I personally approach Aperture in my own photography. So I wanted to show you this practically, and I thought the best way to do that is to show you on the camera I'm recording on, which is the OM1 paired with the 12-45 f4 Pro. When I'm talking to you like this, you can see the background is a little bit blurry, but you can completely see that this is a tree, this is an apartment or playground and stuff like that. You can see what's going on around me. But if I start to move back like this, you should be able to see that the background now actually becomes more in focus. And the same happens when I move closer to the camera instead. I'm sorry, this is a little bit uncomfortable, but now I'm really close to the camera. You should be able to see over here that the background is actually more blurry than when I'm standing normally like this. And this is called subject distance. Having your subject closer to the camera means a shallower depth of field. Meanwhile, a subject further away means a deeper depth of field. Same f4, but completely different looks. Now let's see what happens if I zoom myself all the way into 45mm, which is about 90mm full frame equivalent. And to even fit in the frame, I have to move a lot further back from the camera. And that's when you notice two things. The first one being the background actually looks a lot more blurry, and the background also looks a lot more pulled in towards me. That's what photographers mean when they talk about compression. The background hasn't actually moved, of course. It's just the way that longer lenses change perspective. And here's why. When you're zooming in, you're narrowing your field of view. You're only showing a tiny slice of the world. And that slice makes the background appear bigger in relation to me. So trees, buildings, mountains behind me looks like they have been pulled closer to me. But the key is distance. If I stayed right up close to the camera at 90mm, you would only see a super close-up of my nose. Not really flattering, and I will spare you the pain. The compression effect only works because I've stepped back, then zoomed in to keep myself the same size in the frame. The background doesn't move, but to the camera it looks like it has. This is why portraits look so different between different focal lengths. At 20mm at f1.8, you get some background separation, but the background is still recognizable. At 85mm f1.8, you've had to step back to frame the subject in the same way. And now you get much stronger blur and that flattering compression. Same aperture, but because of distance and plus focal length, the photo feels completely different. Now, personally, I don't really play with compression that much in my own work, but a Swedish photographer who does this beautifully is Louise Åvall. She is trained as a nature photographer, but she also has a love for fantasy. And when those two come together, she creates these magical storybook-looking images. If you're shooting a mountain range at 20mm and you don't really have anything close to your lens, it doesn't really matter if you're shooting it at f1.8 or f22, everything will look sharp. Although at f22 you will start seeing diffraction in the photo, making the images soft anyway. That's a subject for another video, but yeah. But that's just the combination of a wide lens and a distant subject. But if you bring something close into the foreground, like a rock or a flower, suddenly depth of field matters again. And that background can go soft even at wider angles. Now compare that to zooming into 100mm and then stepping back to keep the foreground in the frame. Please don't fall off in the mountains though. Suddenly the mountains can look much closer and softer. Same idea. Aperture is only one part of the equation. Distance and focal length are doing the heavy lifting. On the street, this is huge. At 24mm or 20mm, 18, 28, at f4, you can still shoot close to somebody and still show the environment with a little background blur or none at all. Step back and zoom to 90mm and you will get a completely different look. I would show you an example, but I literally have none. Sorry about that. But your subject becomes isolated, the background stacks up behind them, and the scene feels more compressed. And remember, this is all at the same aperture. The only thing changed was distance and focal length. Two completely different photos, just from balancing those two factors. Alright, so that's the principle. How do you actually use this in practice? Here's a few ways I think about it. A lot of people actually think you have to shoot landscapes at f8 or f11, but if your subject is far away and you don't have anything close to your lens, you can shoot wide open, whether that being f4 or f1.8. Just know that most lenses perform the best around f4 to f5.6, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But the beauty of this is you will actually get more light, which means lower ISO and or faster shutter speed, cleaner files, less noise and less risk of motion blur. You don't always need a crazy fast lens for blur. If you get closer to your subject or use a longer focal length and move back, even a f4 lens can give you great separation. It's about working with distance and perspective, not just chasing f1.2. In fast-paced photography like street or sports, shutter speed is usually the priority. If I need more speed and I don't want to push the ISO further, I'll open up the aperture if the subject distance allows it. If they're far enough away, I can shoot at f2.8 without losing important focus, and that gives me that little extra speed to freeze the action. So how do I apply this to my own photography? As most of you know, I shoot Micro Four Thirds. That's a smaller sensor than full frame, with a 2x crop factor. Now, this whole thing doesn't just apply to Micro Four Thirds. It's the same principle between any crop sensor. APS-C compared to full frame compared to medium format compared to large format. The smaller the sensor, the deeper the depth of field you get at the same aperture and equivalent field of view. And here's what I love about that. My 20mm lens at f4 on Micro Four Thirds gives me the same depth of field as a 40mm lens at f8 on a full frame sensor. But the huge difference is I'm actually shooting at f4 and not f8. That means I'm letting in 2 stops of light more than the full frame setup. And what does more light mean? It means I can keep my ISO lower, which gives me cleaner images with less noise. Or I can use a faster shutter speed, which helps me avoid motion blur. So in practice I get the look I like, the deeper depth of field at my favorite focal length, but I don't have to pay the exposure penalty that a full frame shooter would at f8. That balance is honestly why I love shooting Micro Four Thirds. So why does this matter? Well, because aperture isn't just a magic blur dial, it's one piece of a triangle. Aperture, focal length and subject distance. All three combine to decide how your photo actually looks. Once you understand that, you will stop following rules as f8 and be there or shoot everything at 1.4. Instead, you start making intentional choices about how you want the photo to feel. And that's when perspective really becomes king. So, there you go. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and consider subscribing. I appreciate it so much. If I got something wrong, let me know down in the comments. But until next time, have a good day or evening whenever you're watching this. Out.